You're listening to New York's only home for Reefer Madness. Every week, we'll explore the unique perspective of cannabis in the global hub of commerce and culture. Hear the insights, stories, challenges, and successes of those blazing a path from Brooklyn to Buffalo and everywhere in between. I'm your host, Kalen Cassetter, coming to you from the Green Valley of Opportunity, Binghamton, New York. This is the Empire State of Cannabis. Welcome to the show. This week we have a really exciting guest, Marc Privitera. Marc is a leader and OG in the New York hemp industry, especially in fiber, as one of the first businesses included in New York's pilot program. He's the CEO and principal engineer for PreProcess. Marc's family operates a dairy farm in upstate New York where he has grown hemp for fiber over the past few years. Marc, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kalen. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell us what PreProcess is? You know, from your website, it looks like you manufacture almost every hemp cannabis product here, but also way more than that too.
Yeah, we're a bunch of chemical engineer, entrepreneur farmers, which is quite a combination. And we start companies. So what we'll do is we'll have an idea, or we'll have some technology, or folks will come to us with some developing technology. And we bolt all the pieces together to get it commercialized. So we stand stuff up. We've done a lot of different things, and we use our skills in different industries. So our journey to hemp is as a raw material, as an agricultural opportunity, and then a raw material for feeding into what we hope is a lot of mainstream products. So that's what we're all about.
Yeah. So what brought you to hemp, and what brought you back to New York? Because you spent a lot of your career on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, and we still have operations on the West Coast. So we go across country a lot, which is great because we stop in the middle in the mountains and we go skiing a lot in the winter. So, so it's a nice deal.
Yeah.
So getting into hemp, well, we do what PreProcess does is we try and look out like 5 years and see, all right, what's going to be the next thing? We like to be on the leading edge. So 20 years ago, we jumped out of corporate America and we jumped into biofuels, and we were pretty successful with biofuels for a while. Then we looked and saw, oh, rare earths were going to be a thing. So we jumped into rare earths. Then we saw lithium was a thing. So we jumped into lithium, and we ran these for about 5 years, 6 years. We still have some lithium stuff going. We still have some biofuel stuff going. And, you know, like I said, we'll create a company, and then we'll either sell it off or sell a piece of it off. It becomes something else. You know, so then what we saw was hemp about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. We saw, hey, hemp's got a lot of potential as a feedstock and also as an ag opportunity. The dairy business is not what it once was. And, you know, the family's got a lot of folks dependent on, you know, the farm staying. So for a new cash crop, because of course soybeans and corn have their issues as well if you're trying to sell them, especially out of northern New York. You know, we wanted to get a new rotation crop with some value to it, but we wanted to connect it to some higher tech product sets. That was the main thing that we saw. So,
interesting. So that makes sense. So you know, you're looking at. So your family runs a dairy farm in upstate New York, right? And in the North Country specifically?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So you're looking at some of the troubles there on the agricultural side in terms of milk increasingly commoditized and increasingly being pushed down, right? Soy, corn, and, you know, hemp possibly as diversifier, but you're taking your expertise in the engineering field and saying, well, hemp has some great possibilities. What are some of the exciting possibilities that brought you to hemp on the industrial side?
Yeah, so the structure in the bast is very strong and it's very light. It's got a open structure that gives you a lot of surface area. So with that is one of the reasons why it's a bioconcentrator. So it'll grab certain elements of the periodic table out of different bulk areas. You know, if you have a arsenic and some certain heavy metal, contaminated soil, you know, it'll draw it up, and that's because of that property, right? It's got basically space to uptake. So if you can take that trick that comes from nature and manipulate it, you can make it grab other things. So for instance, you can load the material, right? The bast, the ground bast with uh, other chemicals, other elements, and you can tune it to kind of go after certain elements. And that's one of the tricks, right? So you can make a functional sorbent, right? Something that'll grab. So we all know that
Hmm.
you can make a sorbent for like bedding, but you can make hemp, uh, be attracted to other things. You can use it as a substrate. Then the other thing that it does is it makes a really nice carbon, and carbon's a big deal. Carbon in the United States, I mean, all of our lives are dependent on carbon because of the water treatment, right? And that's you can make good water treatment carbon out of herd. But what's even more interesting is you can fool hemp carbon into behaving towards some of the higher structured carbons that are very interesting for our futures, right? It's not graphene and it's
Hmm.
not graphite, but you can do things to the hemp carbon chemically that get you part of the way there. So it's a very exciting material.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you talk about water treatment, what process of that water treatment are you using the carbon in?
Yeah, almost every water treatment plant uses a lot of carbon. It grabs organics.
Hmm.
It clarifies, and it takes a lot of the different um, sequential separations have inorganic components, right? And then it has some hard chemistry, and then it has some organic chemistry, and the carbon is part of that sequential operation. So that's usually, or that is where it's used. If you look at some of these filters that
Yep.
you put on your sink, if you cut one in half, you'll see a yellow resin, and you'll see some black specks. Well, that's the balance, right? The yellow resin takes out a lot of the inorganics, and the black specks are carbon that take out, and that's just a water treatment plant on a very small, localized scale. So,
Yeah. What's the source of that carbon then? What they're using usually?
a lot of it's coconuts. Coconuts make a
Hmm.
really good carbon. Of course, we don't grow many coconuts in the United States, so it's imported. So, and the use of carbon, the amount of carbon that's going to be needed is just going to go up with population and other applications. So, we'd love to say, oh, we're going to displace a foreign import, but really, coconut doesn't have a big issue, or carbon really doesn't have a big issue being imported. We're just going to augment using an American grown material and convert it into some higher tech materials. The other thing that carbon does is because you can fake it into kind of behaving like other carbons, more structured carbons, right? And remember, there's amorphous carbons and there's structured carbons. Amorphous carbons are like charcoal and hemp carbon. And then
Hmm.
structured carbons are graphite and graphene, right? And graphene, of course, is just like phyllo dough of the graphite, right? So graphite is like a baklava, which I really like. And if you just peel the layers off, that's graphene, right? So you can fake amorphous carbon into behaving sort of like structured carbon, which allows you to do things in electronics and allows you to do things in energy storage devices.
Gotcha. So as you described in the beginning, and by the way, I love baklava also. So on the same page there with you. We have a great Greek restaurant in Binghamton. But when you talk about what drew you to hemp as a raw ingredient, so we look at possibly a substitute as a carbon, right? What is can hemp be from a price perspective, can hemp be competitive as a carbon source, in your opinion?
Yes, once the infrastructure for high volume material throughput is in place, it's very difficult right now to say I'm going to put in 10,000 acres and try and displace um, other raw material sources that have 100 years of infrastructure.
Yeah.
But if we got to 1 million acres of hemp carbon, throughout the United States, and we had some processing infrastructure that was sized for 24/7, chemical industrial scale market uh, supply assurance, sure, absolutely. Um, it's really a problem of activation energy. If the numbers are supported by visionary leaders.
I lost you there, Marc.
All right, let's get a restart point.
You're describing the classic chicken and the egg scenario that we keep running into with hemp. So the infrastructure needs to be there, right? But who's going to build the infrastructure without the market? And the market saying we can't take it unless we have the infrastructure. Am I seeing that correctly?
Yeah, I wish that you weren't seeing it correctly, but yes, you are. So it's challenging when we go after funding because my company's been successful, but not that successful, right? Not 100 and 200 million dollars successful, and that's really what we're talking about to get an infrastructure built.
So when you talk about that, is that one project, 100, 200 million? Or are you talking about overall?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to get a chemical plant, which this would be, to convert enough raw material hemp, which would be, I'm looking at 50,000 acres, $100 million, and that makes a decent scale for kicking out products, right? The numbers start penciling out, but you want EBITDA that is going to support that, and you want a group of investors that are going to give you the support to get you there. So it's just finding the right people. It's getting the tumblers all to line up, and it happens. it does happen. So.
Well, it happened with CBD, right? They built it for a market that wasn't ready for that amount. I mean, there is hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in CBD extraction and nowhere for a lot of that oil to go. And we talk about that a lot on this show. So a part of me thinks, and I brought this up, with our interview with someone Lupardo that ran a few weeks ago. It's that, wouldn't that investment have been better placed into fiber, right? Into exactly what you're talking about. And hindsight's 2020, et cetera. But it almost seems like CBD was flashier, but there wasn't any more legitimate reason to invest into CBD than there would be into the type of infrastructure you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it in my opinion, it all goes down to the product set. If we can get the hemp to be a raw material in established product sets, you don't have to teach the consumer how to use the end product, right? It's like, consumers buy cars, okay, and the product supply chain is looking for an insulating bat for the automobiles. And look, we can make this out of hemp fiber, which is antimicrobial and a good environmental story. We just slip that into an already existing product that the consumers know. Carbon, we need water treatment carbon. The specs are there, you know how to make it. Okay, we grow hemp, we convert it to water treatment carbon, and we slip it into an already existing educated market. CBD, we've messed with CBD for the last 3 years, just like everybody else. And the tricky part I see is we've had to try and educate the consumer, and it's a very hard thing to do. Now it's going to continue to grow, but it's going to take time to educate the consumer to get beyond the early adopters, or to get beyond the folks that are skittish because of the still misunderstanding between CBD and THC and other things. So if companies invest in educating the consumer, they'll create the demand, and the CBD will the market will become a little bit more stable than it is. I will admit too, there has to be a little bit more clarity on some bigger legal overhang.
Yeah, the FDA has to tell us whether it's a drug or a dietary supplement or a food, and it doesn't seem like they're in any rush to do that.
So you don't have all those problems. You don't have all those problems with trying to slip into existing supply chains. So I'd love to see 100, 200, 500 million dollars, and that's the other thing. It takes that number to get these processing plants built that will be economic. Whereas CBD was almost it was too easy to get into. Yeah. I mean, you can put 10 acres down with 20 people harvesting, and you can sell your feminized harvest pretty reasonably, and people go, oh, that's not bad. So that's the problem, right? It was almost too easy, so it's too much, and the fiber side needs big numbers. There is no $10,000 or $500,000 investment in a fiber system that's going to pay. You got to look at big numbers. And
it's not even a 10 million investment, right?
No, no, not really. No. And that's one thing we've learned in my 30 years doing projects in the chemical space. I mean, you've got to be ready to play big, right? So, the rare earths project we did $800 million worth of stuff. The lithium stuff was 400 million. I mean, they're big numbers. So if you take all the investors that are out there, let's say there's 10,000 investors, or investment firms, right? There's only probably 1,000 that are interested in projects that big. And there's probably only 100 that are willing to listen to you on a hemp thing. These are mainstream investors, a little bit different from the cannabis investors, but
sure.
So you've got to find the right mix, the right organization that's like, I have a 7-year horizon. I understand, $100 million. Okay, so I'm expecting an EBITDA of whatever their risk profiles are and whatever they want to kick cash out to make it. Of course, they want $1 billion company after 7 years. So you got to try and figure out how to put those pieces together, and it's getting there. It's getting there.
Yeah. No, it seems like it's getting there, but in a lot of things, it almost seems like the problem needs to smack someone in the face before they actually come to it. So the question is whether there's a problem. I mean, like I said, there's not a problem importing carbon, so there's not an immediate need for a substitute for carbon, right? I mean,
no,
there isn't, right? So now you have to think of what the value add on hemp is, right? Sustainability, right? So you can sustainably grow it, sustainably harvest it. We talk about jobs, we talk about revenue for farmers. These are things that it strikes me that an investor might feel good about, but that's not going to make them move $250 million into a project to do, right? So that's where the government comes
Kalen,
in.
You're exactly right, Kalen. You should be in an investment house. You're asking the exact right questions. I have not been able to be successful in all the pitching we've done because you're right. They go, well, what is the unmet need? Which is like entrepreneurial 101, right? So yeah, it's a tough story at the moment. Now, I'll give you two things that might be unmet needs depending on your point of view. Graphene is expensive. Graphene has massive performance advantages over current high surface area conductive materials. If we can get a energy storage device out of a less expensive alternative to graphene, that is an unmet need. So we're trying to go down that path. We just haven't got the chemistry where it needs to be yet, but we're definitely pursuing that. And that's a lot of people are pursuing that.
Gotcha. So that's a breakthrough. Yep. Go for
that's
it.
Go
on the second one. Mm-hmm.
The other one that's interesting is, okay, we've got a significant plastics problem in the world.
Yeah.
And polylactic acid, which is a compostable plastic alternative, is made from corn and sugar. Okay, that's not a problem. That's a good way to go. There's another one, polyhydroxyl alkanoates, which is a little better at the biodegradable story, and it also can be made from a sugar base, but there's a route for a renewable carbon base. Well, hemp is a pretty fast renewable carbon source. So you'd take the draw off of corn, right? And you'd be able to use hemp as the carbon source for these. And you'd be able to produce these plastics that are very, very popular right now. And that looks to be like you can get it to the 80 cents a pound, about where you need to be. So that's the other thing that you can make some you can make some headway with the deal flow that's needed as you look at what investors are looking at and how much risk they're willing to take and where the technology is.
So we're talking about a biodegradable plastic, right? Is basically what you're saying.
Right. So what you do is you take the hemp, you grow it in a renewable, so you got one. Then it's biodegradable on the back end, so you got a double. You got a double environmental story, and you've got a cost parity. So it plays, So
Yeah, and it's also, let's think about what the cost is of these ecosystems. I was talking to a talented researcher out in the Adirondacks who's been doing a lot of research on microplastics in those environments in the Adirondacks, and what she was telling me is they're actually finding that microplastics are not staying in the marine environments in the ocean that we thought they were. They're being brought into the wind stream and the jet stream, and they're being deposited in ecosystems all across the country, and in the Adirondacks especially, they're seeing a lot of microplastics. So that's an externalized cost. But if, again, and this is where I think, when we talk about these problems, this is a chance for the government to step in. The government, first off, we all know that they need to take that ability for companies to externalize these costs, these microplastics, the costs on our ecosystems, our costs in our water and our drinking water, where we're finding microplastics, and put a price on it, right? You got to put a price on carbon emissions. You have to do that to now create this. Now it's a need. Now it's a need because now it's costing you more to use non-biodegradable plastic because you're getting slapped with a tax because the government's saying we got to clean up your mess, and society has to clean up your mess, and we're going to charge you for that, right? So again, it comes to me is I see an opportunity and a need for the government to step in here, and whether it's coming in and saying, okay, why don't we fund some of this project? I mean, let's say they did in Buffalo with a Tesla facility that's sitting there empty, right? Why don't we fund a facility here, because we know it's going to create good jobs, we know it's going to help our farming communities, and we know it's going to meet some of the greatest challenges that we've ever faced in human history with climate change, right? But then also saying, okay, we are going to put in legislation that says you're not being taken off the hook here for depositing plastics into our fragile ecosystems and into our drinking water that we all have to deal with later on in life, that we're not even sure of some of the consequences from the health perspective. Do you see where I'm coming from on that?
Oh, I completely agree with you. So I have two schools of thought. I'm totally with you. If we made product manufacturers responsible for some of the downstream afterlife of product issues, that microplastic is one, and put a value on it, that would fund the front end, and it would drive the front end. Let's not have this problem in the first place. So I'm totally with you there. On the flip side, though, I agree that government funding would be fantastic, but I'm also nervous because we can't just keep printing money. So the priorities on what's going on has to be balanced. You know what I mean? So hey, if the government wanted to fund us, I've got a great $100 million project that would bring much goodness to New York State, and tell me who to call. But on my as a taxpayer, who the government works for me, so it's like, okay, I want to be responsible with these dollars. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, well, that's true. But listen, if we're going to print money, let's get a return on our investment. Let's look at what the return is, and because we're spending money in the wrong places, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And regardless, printing money or not, I mean, the money won't matter if we have an unstable climate and we have runaway climate change moving forward. And
no, we do. I mean, that's the problem, right? We do. We're already there. I mean, my kids are going to have to be dealing with this, and my grandkids are going to have to be dealing with this. It makes me sick that my generation is part of the problem. That's why I'm into this. That's why PreProcess is what it is. We try and solve these problems. We try and, yes, we're doing things in the mainstream, but like our lithium projects, lithium, electric cars, electric storage for, solar and wind. That's why we're trying to get the lithium out of the ground so it's available to do green technology. Hemp. Let's we have a a renewable resource. Instead of cutting down trees, we have an annual renewable resource. We have products we can make from it that are in the mainstream. Let's start doing those types of things. And I'm totally with you that it would be great to have a couple $1 billion fund that it would be set up to start some of these things so that investors could not have to get over those hurdles that believe me, for the last 2 years I've been getting hit by every hurdle possible. I've been on Sand Hill Road out in Silicon Valley. I've been up to Toronto. I've been out to Vancouver and to Denver. I've been down to New York City many times, pitching to groups, trying to get excitement for this stuff. And everybody is excited, but the numbers have to play, and they're tough. It's tough to get them to play. Yeah.
And so you think those two spots, we're talking about biodegradable plastics, right? And then the other one that you're talking about is basically carbon for electric cars, right?
Yeah.
You think those are the two opportunities? And I remember, we hosted a summit a couple years ago, and I remember you coming. You said there might be 25,000 uses for hemp, but let's narrow it down to the 10 that can actually be economically, viable. Do you still you still subscribe to that? I had to a couple years ago, but
yeah. I mean, look, you can make money doing textiles, but again, it's the same story. It's like, well, okay, I'm competing, so I'm going to have a niche market in the textile mainstream, right? I'm going to have guys that are like, yeah, I really like this hemp blend, water treatment carbon. Yeah, but you're right. There is a source already. However, the source is from overseas. So we can probably, once the infrastructure's there, we can probably beat them on cost just because it'll be local. Wood replacement, right? So composites and the oriented strand board. Hemp could be a great replacement, but there's plenty of wood chips. There's plenty of other mainstream uses for wood where that's generating the waste. So you're going to compete with the waste of an industry. So, but oriented strand board could be a good one. So there's a lot of other things that it could be competitive with. But I do think it would be better for the hemp industry to start focusing on educating supply chain folks on what those 10 might be. And if supply chain folks have a story, like the balancing between, yeah, we want to have an environmental angle because our consumers are really looking for the environmental aspects of what we're building. Well, when you build a car, you've got to do some things that are tough to not necessarily be a little rough on the environment, but you can balance that with doing other things that are good for the environment or good, like the hemp insulating pads or even using hemp fiber in fiberglass instead of e-glass. So there's other things, but yeah, the ones that are going to make the investors kind of like, oh, this is interesting, this is sexy, and I can make money at it. Yeah, I think it might be the bioplastics, the bioplastic route, the degradable bioplastics, and then the carbon. At least that's what we're betting on.
Yeah. No, listen, it makes sense, and it all comes down to how can we convince those with money and those in the supply chain too, right? Because you go to this buyer who is responsible for sourcing the raw ingredients, and he's told we need to make our 40% margin to the distributor. Right. And so this is how much we can spend to make each unit, right? This is what our unit cost can be. So that's what he's looking at. But he's also going, okay, I've got a wiggle room of maybe 10%, right? Where I can go a little bit above that cost. If we can then put a symbol on our label that says eco-friendly, eco-sourced, American-sourced, etc., that's where we need to be, right? And it sounds like we're getting close to there, but we need that push in the infrastructure investment. And, personally, I would love to see not one more dollar by the state government or the federal government going to CBD. I think people have enough money into it. These big boys that are running the industry here, and if they can't get it done without taxpayer money, then too bad. But what can't get done without taxpayer money is something that's not only going to have a positive effect on jobs and farmers, the positive effect that we haven't really seen with CBD necessarily, right, or hemp, extract feminized crop, but also have a positive impact on society and can maybe shore up our supply chains because, let's not forget with climate change, we saw supply chains collapse with an organism that can't even think, right? A virus can't think what's going to happen when we have runaway climate change and our fate is looking like, another planet in our solar system, Venus, right? What's going to happen when we start to get these levels when these places where they're sourcing carbon, where they're sourcing coconuts, are places with massive instability because of refugees and migrants, and maybe it's underwater even, where these ecosystems have just been destroyed beyond repair, that shoring up the supply chain domestically, I think, is starting to make a little more sense. So, hopefully our policymakers can see that, and our business leaders too. Warren Buffett's got a lot of cash on hand. Maybe maybe some of that cash can go into some of these projects you're talking about. So Marc, if there's anything you can leave our listeners with, right, because I think this episode is going to get our listeners interested, fired up, what can they do as an actionable next step that might help the industry overall?
Yeah, education of the products that they're using, right? Understand beyond what's just in front of you. Understand from where it's coming, right? That's I think the best thing, right? Because if consumers start saying, I'd really like to make a more economic or a more environmental choice, and the economics get better as demand goes up, right? Because we get more and more economy of scale. But that's the best thing. Like, I'd love for consumers to start saying, 5% of a cottonized hemp fiber in a cotton blend. Yeah, that's I understand where that's coming from. It's less fertilizer than cotton, and it's a new fiber that's grown on farms that are in rotation. Or I'm going to look at a car that hey, is the insulating pad? Is this tell me a little bit more about what's in this car? Things like that.
Yeah.
And then just more education on the possibilities that make sense. I think it's a hard story, right? Because people don't stop and think about that all the time. But that's what it really is. Just be aware of what you're buying and what effect it has on it.
Yeah.
If folks started demanding, hey, I don't want to use plastic anymore. I want to know that this plastic is going to go back to, basically dust. If people really started driving that, then the manufacturers of the finished goods would start saying, look, I need PHA resin. I need PLA resin. I can't use my normal non-renewable, non-biodegradable resins I've been using. It's education, really.
Yeah, it's education. I think
if I had one thing that all of us hemp guys should be doing is we should be having massive like the Got Milk campaign. It's like all right, here's hemp in your future campaign, or the product supply guys. Let me tell you about where you can put hemp in your product supply. It's all education the next couple of years, I think.
It is education and marketing, right? I mean, I think there's two things a consumer can do, or a citizen of the United States can do, that's the most powerful thing: your dollar and your vote. Make sure you're putting your dollar in the right place, and make sure you're putting your vote in the right place. These things matter; they really do. And you can't say it enough. So, thanks, Marc. I'm sure we're going to bring you on again, because this was fascinating. There's a lot more that we can unpack here and talk through. So, thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Anytime, Ken. Thanks for having me. We'll see you later.
Absolutely. See ya. And if you want to hear more of this, like, subscribe, keep coming back week after week. We're going to have some great new guests for you too.